Welcome all to Whispers in the Dark, where shadows breathe and forgotten voices stir. Step beyond the veil and lose yourself in a realm where reality fractures and nightmares whisper lullabies. Here we conjure true psychological thrillers, haunted tales, and horror stories that burrow deep beneath your skin and nestle in the quiet corners of your mind. Each story crackles like old film reels, unspooling secrets too heavy for daylight. Whether it's the slow unraveling of a fractured psyche or the cold caress of something unseen lurking just behind you, we promise narratives that will haunt you long after the final word is spoken. So get ready, dim the lights, slip on your headphones and listen closely for the whispers in the dark, and subscribe if you dare to return.
I've never told anyone this story before, not my parents, not my friends, no one. But I can't sleep anymore, and I think if I don't get it out, I'll lose what little grip I have left. My name's Adam. I'm 19. And last fall, after my grandfather passed away, I moved in with my grandmother to help clean out their old house. It's one of those mid-century brick ranches, long, low, and creaking with time. The kind of place that always smells faintly like old books and something you can't quite name. My grandmother didn't like going into the basement. She told me her knees couldn't handle the stairs anymore, but it was more than that. Every time I mentioned going down there, her eyes would drift, and she'd twist the thin gold cross she wore around her neck until her knuckles whitened. It took me 3 weeks before I finally went down. It was a grey Sunday afternoon. Rain tapped at the windows, and the whole house felt still, like it was holding its breath. The basement door groaned when I opened it. Not the usual squeak, but something deeper, almost wet, like a throat clearing itself. The stairs sagged as I descended. They're the old wooden kind, open-backed. You could feel the cold rising up as you got closer to the bottom, heavy and damp. My shoes stuck slightly on the concrete floor when I stepped off the last stair. It was darker than it should have been. One dangling bulb swayed gently, even though there was no draft. I kept telling myself it was just the old house shifting. That's what they do, right? They breathe. I was almost done stacking boxes when I heard it. A whisper, not loud, not clear, just soft enough to make me freeze in place. I turned, slowly, scanning the cluttered shelves and rusted tools. Nothing. Maybe the vents. The second time it happened, a few days later, I was crouched near the far corner of the basement, close to the crawl-space door under the stairs. My hand brushed the floor, and it was freezing cold in that one patch. Not the kind of chill from bad insulation. Colder. Sharper. I moved my hand an inch to the left, and it was normal again. The third time I wasn't alone. I brought my friend Jacob to help clear some shelves. We were talking, laughing, when both of us stopped mid-sentence. You know that feeling when you're being watched, like a prickle just under your scalp? It was like that, but heavier. He looked at me and said, "Do you hear that?" I didn't. At first. But then we both heard a faint sound, not a whisper this time. Breathing. Slow and steady, like someone just out of sight, calm as anything, waiting. We got out of there fast. But it stuck with me. That corner. That door. The crawl space was bolted shut, and I wasn't about to open it, but every time I was in the house alone, I felt it, like something was pressing lightly on the back of my neck, just enough to remind me it was there. A week before I moved out, I found something small that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I dropped a wrench, and it rolled under the bottom step. When I reached under to grab it, my hand brushed against something soft. Fabric. I pulled it out. It was a child's mitten, tiny moth-eaten, covered in dust. And inside, when I turned it over in my hand, was a small, cracked baby tooth. I don't know how it got there. I don't want to know. I sealed the crawl space tighter and never told my grandmother. I figured if she didn't want to know, neither did I. But every so often, when I'm alone, when the house settles strangely or when I dream, I feel that same cold spot on my palm, like it never really left, like it's still waiting, patiently. I never knew my uncle. My mom barely spoke of him, and when she did, it was always in fragments. Strange man, she'd mutter, or he didn't belong in this time. I figured he was just one of those reclusive, soft-spoken types who collected antiques and maybe talked to birds. When the lawyer called to say I'd inherited his house in Vermont, I thought it was a scam. I was 26, broke, stuck in a warehouse job with a boss who drank glue and freshly dumped. A free house felt like a cosmic consolation prize. The place sat a few miles outside a town so small you could blink and miss it, Victorian style technically. But time had rotted any charm it once had. Paint peeled like sunburned skin. Windows warped yellow with age. The whole thing leaned slightly, like it had given up standing tall years ago. The trees around it looked sick. There was no bird song, no wind, just stillness. Charlie, my lab mix, came with me. Normally he loved new places, tail wagging, snout first, dumb optimism, but not here. The second we stepped inside, he froze. Hackles up, head low. He growled at the corners, sniffed the air like it insulted him, and he would not go near the pantry. Every time I got close, he'd block the doorway with his body and whine like a dying thing. I spent the day unpacking and sweeping out layers of dead flies and rat shit. By nightfall, I was starving. No groceries yet, so I found a pizza place still operating in town. The guy who delivered it wouldn't come up the driveway, made me walk to the gate. Place has a bad name, he said, handing over the box without meeting my eyes. Should have burned years ago. I laughed. He didn't. The pizza was cold by the time I got inside. Charlie didn't beg for crust like usual. He just stood at the pantry, ears forward, tail stiff. That's when I decided to move the old cabinet that had been wedged in front of it. The wood left deep scuffs in the floor like it hadn't been touched in decades. Behind it, a door. Narrow, crude, almost deliberately hidden. Boards nailed across it, sealing it shut. The air around it felt colder, thicker. Charlie started barking like something was coming through the wall. He lunged at me, snapping, trying to block me from reaching the door. I had to shove him out and slam the kitchen door shut to keep him out. He howled on the other side like he was grieving. I pulled the boards off. Most came easy, brittle with age. But the last one snapped back, and a jagged nail ripped into my palm. It cut deep. Not a normal cut, and it burned, like it had been waiting for blood. Blood dripped down the wood as I opened the door. A steep staircase led into darkness. The smell hit first, earth and something rotting. Not fresh rot, something older, fungal, alive. I went down with a flashlight. The basement was stone, smaller than expected, and wrong in a way I can't explain. Shelves lined the walls, filled with glass jars, not food, not antiques, animals, mummified things in thick brown fluid, a rabbit with its mouth sewn shut, a snake with a human eye in its skull, a bird with two beaks twisted in a silent scream. The jars had no labels, just deep carved symbols etched into the glass, angry lines, precise, like a language not meant for people. In the center of the room was a wooden chair with leather straps. Something had been restrained there. The wood was clawed up. A few small, bloody teeth lay scattered around it. The flashlight flickered. Then breathing. Not mine. Behind me, wet and shallow. I turned slowly. The light sputtered and surged, and for just a second I saw it, something tall, gaunt. Pale skin stretched too tight, no eyes, a grin that went too wide. The same symbols carved into its chest, like it had done them itself. It didn't move. It just watched. I ran. Somehow I made it back up, slamming the door, and nailing the boards back in with shaking hands. My hand throbbed like it had its own pulse. When I finally peeled off the bandage, the blood was black, thick, moving on its own. Charlie wouldn't come near me. That night, I woke to scratching sounds. He was in the living room, pawing at the floor, snarling at nothing. Then he bit the wall, full-on attack, bloodied his mouth trying to get through it. Something's down there, something that was never human. It chose me the second I bled. It's in my blood now. Charlie doesn't sleep. Neither do I. Every night I hear the whispering. I think I let it out. If you find this, don't come looking. And for the love of God, don't open that door. I'm not crazy. I know how this sounds. I wouldn't believe me either if I wasn't there. But it happened. And I think it's still happening. My parents went out of town for the weekend. Wine festival. Or anniversary or something. First time I had the house to myself, I did what any 18-year-old would. Invited over my two best friends, Tyler and Mark. Sleepover, pizza, all-night gaming marathon. My setup's in the basement. Not your usual creepy, damp basement. It's finished. Huge TV, blackout curtains, RGB strips, surround sound, comfy sectional. Only weird thing, the windows. You know those skinny, high-up windows that sit at ground level? We always joked about how a face could just appear there. We shouldn't have joked. The thing is, Mark had been particularly eager for this sleepover. He'd just gotten dumped by his girlfriend, and he was looking for something, anything, to get his mind off it. He couldn't stop talking about it, laughing at himself, acting like it didn't bother him. Best thing that could have happened, he'd kept saying. But we knew better. The way his eyes kept drifting to his phone, the way he wouldn't let us forget how she'd ended things. We told him it was just a girl, that there were plenty more. He wasn't convinced. We started the night like normal. War zone, shouting, laughing, throwing pizza crusts at each other. Around midnight, Mark grew unusually quiet. I looked over. He was staring at the window, not blinking. "You good?" I asked. I think something moved out there. I got up to check. Nothing but black. I told him it was probably a raccoon. But something in the way he looked at me, like he didn't believe it either. An hour later, we heard the first knock. Just one. From behind us, on the glass. We turned slowly. Nothing but our reflections. But my stomach sank. There was a faint patch of condensation. Like someone had breathed on the window from the outside. Things escalated fast after that. Lights flickering, static buzz in our headsets, wet footprints, barefoot, leading across the concrete from one window to the other. We hadn't gone outside, no one had. Then the whispering started. Not voices exactly. More like language trying to form. It moved along the walls, inside the insulation. We could feel it vibrating through the floor. That's when we saw the face, not pressed against the glass, floating just beyond it, pale, swollen, too symmetrical, eyes too wide, like it was pretending to be human, like it wore a face. And then it blinked. That was enough. Tyler screamed and ran. Mark froze. I had to drag him up the stairs. The power went out just as we hit the top. We didn't sleep, not even after sunrise. When my parents came home, I didn't say anything. They'd never believe it. But that night, I noticed my desktop PC, still in the basement, had powered on by itself. Even weirder, the webcam light was on. I checked the recording. The feed was just static for 2 hours, but at 3:12 a.m., for exactly 6 seconds, the static cleared. The camera was facing the couch, and there, plain as day, was someone sitting on it. Still, watching, smiling at the screen. At me. Only I wasn't there. No one was. We've all gone quiet since then. Mark dropped out of group chat. Tyler won't even mention that night. And sometimes, at 3:12, I still hear knocking on the walls, not the windows, inside the drywall, like it's already in. I don't go in the basement anymore, but I think it comes up sometimes, because last night I found dirt on the hallway carpet and a long, wet handprint on my bedroom door. It's been 3 weeks since the sleepover. Tyler barely speaks. He blocked me on everything except text, and the only thing he ever sent was one message at 3:13 a.m. It's in my house. Mark's the one I'm most worried about. After that night, he went off-grid. At first, I thought it was just him being heartbroken, breakup, trauma, whatever. But when I finally got him to answer a call, his voice sounded wrong, shaky, hollow. I think it followed me, he said. He wouldn't explain what it was, but I already knew. He told me he hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. Every time he closed his eyes, he said he saw the face again, not in dreams, in his room, watching from corners, from mirrors. Once he said he saw it standing on his ceiling. I asked if he still had that recording from the sleepover. He went quiet, then whispered, "I didn't delete it, I tried. It won't go away." I went to his house last night. His mom let me in, said he hadn't been speaking much, just sat in his room with his door shut, lights off. When I knocked, he told me not to open the door. But I could hear the sound of something wet, dragging, pacing behind him. He said something else before I left. "I think it wants you now." I was 22 the year I inherited my uncle's house. He died alone. His body wasn't found for 2 weeks, slumped at the base of the stairs, skin bloated and colourless, eyes open. The certificate said natural causes, but the coroner wouldn't meet my gaze. She said his face looked like he died screaming. No one else wanted the place. My parents offered to help me sell it, but I was broke, sleeping in my car, heating soup over a lighter. A house meant shelter, safety. I thought it was a fresh start. I had no idea it would dismantle me from the inside. The house was quiet, still, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, just waiting. I unpacked slowly, mattress on the basement floor, books on milk crates. I found a photo of my uncle and me fishing. I pinned it above the desk. I don't know why. Maybe because I wanted to feel close to him. He'd always been strange, kind but haunted. My parents said the war changed him, but I think it was this place. I started sleeping in the basement because it felt safer, tighter, like being held. That's where I found the hatch, a low square under the stairs, sealed with iron bolts and ringed with gouges. Not scratches, claw marks. I ignored it. Then I avoided it. Then I sat beside it for hours, as if something inside was calling. And the dreams came, endless descent, cold stone, a pressure in my skull like thought was trying to escape. I'd wake up weeping. One night I woke with dirt under my nails and no memory of leaving the house. Then the hatch was opened, and I went down. The walls changed, from concrete to soil to something veined, like I was inside a lung, a throat. My steps echoed like heartbeats. I wasn't walking anymore. I was descending. At the bottom, a chamber, lined with bones, human bones, twisted like melted wax. In the center, a pit, endless, whispering, and then it noticed me. Not like a person notices, like a void notices a drop of blood. Something reached into me, not with fingers, with understanding. It filled my mind with visions, stars collapsing into holes, cities built from teeth, a godless presence beneath all things. I understood. We are not alone. We were never alone. I don't remember climbing out. I remember bolting the hatch. My hands trembled. I laughed and didn't know why. But something came back with me. I hear it in the walls. I see it in the mirror, a flicker behind my eyes. My dreams are instructions. Last week, I found a second hatch, smaller, beneath the boiler. It's open now, and when I lean close, I swear I can hear my uncle's voice, screaming. It didn't stop there. Every morning, I wake with something missing, a memory, a feeling. Sometimes I try to speak and nothing comes out, not mute, just like the words aren't mine. I look at the photo and I don't remember the fishing trip. I don't remember my uncle's voice. Maybe I never left the pit. I write notes to myself, on walls, on skin. Don't go back down. Stay in the light. You are still you. But even those fade. One morning I woke to find "Open It" scratched into my chest in backwards letters, and the mirrors, they show me things I'm not doing. I watch myself smile. Once I saw something move behind me. When I turned, nothing was there. But the mirror winked. I haven't spoken to anyone in days. I called my mother and heard only breathing. Slow, ragged, not hers, not mine. And the radio, I leave it on to drown the whispers. But it changes. Static, then clear again. He's listening. Once it said my name. This morning I found dirt on the stairs. Fresh. I hadn't been down there, not since the second hatch. I don't remember opening it. But I dream of the pit now not as a place, but a mouth. And I am the tongue. Time no longer flows in one direction. I swear I saw the sun rise 3 times in the same hour. I passed a mirror and caught my reflection aging. Just for a second. Then it snapped back. But now when I speak, I hear a rasp. I tried marking days on the wall, but the tallies move, rearranged in patterns I don't understand. I dream in reverse. I fall up staircases. I watch myself descend into the hatch. From the outside, when I scream, no one hears. Last night I blinked, and the whole room was filled with water. Not wet, full, floating, silent. A fish swam past with a human face. It mouthed my name. I blinked again and everything was dry. Maybe I drowned days ago. The house itself has started to shift. Floorboards groan like ribs giving way. Doors open to walls. I found a staircase that shouldn't exist. Just dark. I lit a match and dropped it, but it never hit the bottom. It floated back up, burning. The air is wrong. Heavy. Like I'm breathing what someone else exhaled. I cough and it tastes like dirt and copper. The shadows don't follow the light. Sometimes they lag. Sometimes they look at me. Something is watching me from inside the dry wall. I hear it shift. Bulbs dim when I walk past. I caught my own reflection last night, but it blinked too late. It's learning about me, and it wants to wear me. As I retell the story I'm about to share with you, I catch myself looking over my shoulder, covered in goosebumps. I should have listened to the silence. Not the kind of silence you get in a quiet room or a forest at dusk. This was heavier, clotted, as if the air itself refused to carry sound. It began the moment I stepped into the basement of the vacation home I'd rented in Chiang Rai, Thailand. I'd come here to escape. Work, noise, expectations, life. A 3-month sabbatical in the misty north of Thailand. The home was a teakwood marvel perched on the edge of a forest, old but beautifully maintained. Its charm cloaked its rot. On the first day, I noticed a small trap-door beneath a woven rug in the living room. Odd place for one. I assumed it was for storage, maybe wine. But when I pulled it open, I saw old wooden stairs descending into darkness, the air immediately cooler, as if the earth itself was exhaling. No lights. The power box didn't control it. I used my phone's flashlight the first time I went down. The basement smelled like mold and wet rock. The walls were rough stone, some etched with markings I didn't recognize, neither Thai nor anything I'd seen in books. But what truly unsettled me was how unlike a basement it felt. It was vast, much too vast for the house above. I chalked it up to unfamiliar architecture, a historical quirk. That night I dreamed of whispering voices in a language I couldn't understand. I should have left. By the third day, I found a door at the far end of the basement I swore hadn't been there before. It was arched, ancient, made of blackened wood, and adorned with a pattern of concentric eyes. No handle, but it was warm to the touch. That night, something tapped on the door. I heard it from the floor above, 3 gentle taps. Pause. 3 more. And again, as if it knew I was listening. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, heart pounding in time with the taps. I told myself it was rats. On the 5th night, I left my phone recording in the basement. When I checked the footage in the morning, the screen was black, except for occasional flickers of red. But the audio... God... The audio. The recording started with silence, then breathing, not mine, wet, ragged, like someone or something struggling with the act of being alive. It lasted for nearly 5 minutes before a voice whispered directly into the mic, "Why did you open it?" I stopped the recording, deleted it. But the words wouldn't delete from my mind. I stopped going downstairs, but the door... It haunted me. Every night the tapping returned. It grew louder. It wanted something. I started nailing the trapdoor shut. The next morning the nails were scattered around the living room, each one bent backwards. The rug was back in place. I didn't eat. I didn't go outside. I sat with bloodshot eyes locked on that rug, every muscle in my body ready to flee and frozen just the same. It was on the 10th day that I noticed my reflection lagging. I'd go to the bathroom mirror and brush my teeth, but the reflection stared too long, blinked too late. One night it smiled when I didn't. I punched the mirror, shards cutting deep into my knuckles. The glass bled. Not metaphorically, real thick red blood oozed from the cracks and dripped into the sink. I vomited until I was empty and dry, my own bile flecked with tiny white worms. I should have screamed. I wanted to. But my voice had grown alien in my throat, like it belonged to someone else. I whispered instead, whispering like they had in my dreams. By day 12, I caved and returned to the basement, flashlight trembling in my hand. I needed to see the door. I needed to understand what had been opened. It was ajar. A sliver of absolute blackness peered out from within. Not darkness, not shadow, absence. Like the concept of light had never existed beyond that threshold, and something stood on the other side. Not a person. Number. It was tall, far taller than the ceiling should allow, its limbs bending at angles that hurt the eye. Its body was made of mouths. Not eyes, not flesh, just mouths, hundreds of them, opening and closing silently, except one. One mouth in the center of its chest opened wide and spoke. It used my voice. "John, you are home now." I ran. I tore my fingernails out scrambling up the stairs, but no matter how fast I moved, I heard it behind me. Not chasing, but watching. I tried to leave the house. The front door wouldn't budge. The windows showed only black fog. My phone had no signal. I screamed until my throat split raw. On the 15th day, I found a journal in the living room. It hadn't been there before. The leather cover was old, and the pages were in English, written in a neat hand. It belonged to the man who owned the house before me. His final entry read, "It promised knowledge. It promised peace. All I had to do was let it in." I didn't think letting it in meant letting myself out. Do not answer the tapping. I left and have since sold the property in exchange for a house with no basement. We should have just called the damn Uber. It was around 2:30 a.m., and we were walking back to campus after a long night out at Haven Club downtown. The four of us, me, John, Mars, and Ian, were still riding the high, buzzed, sweaty, and full of garbage food. We laughed too loud, swerved down sidewalks, argued about who danced with who. That stupid, heady kind of happiness that makes you think nothing can touch you. Then John said, "Let's cut through Wexler." I stopped mid-step. Wexler? That old parking garage. "It cuts off like 50 minutes, Ian said. "Come on, it's just a parking lot. What, you scared?" I looked at the towering concrete structure half sunken into the edge of downtown. It hadn't been used in years. Mold stained the corners, vines crept through its busted walls, and broken glass glittered in patches of moonlight. It looked like something that should have been condemned. "I mean, yeah," I muttered. "Little bit." But Mars was already leading the way, shoulder-checking a rusted gate out of the way. We followed him in. Inside it was worse. Damp air, graffiti like gibberish on the walls, old tire marks fossilized into cracked cement. The overhead lights were long dead, and the only illumination came from our phones. Everything echoed. Footsteps, breathing, even our jokes sounded hollow and forced. We were maybe halfway through the second level when we saw it, a narrow stairwell tucked into a wall, partially blocked by a few dusty orange cones and a frayed strip of caution tape. Spray-painted next to it was the phrase, "Level B. Do not enter Mars," turned his light on the cones. "Yo, check this out." "Nah," I said immediately. "Let's not mess with that." "Why not?" Ian asked, already pulling one of the cones aside. "Bet this place has a maintenance floor. It's probably just storage." "But why block it off?" I asked. "Why post warnings?" John squinted down the stairwell. "Only one way to find out." Mars chuckled. "What, you scared again?" They started down the stairs. I hesitated, then followed. Because that's what you do. You don't want to be the one who stayed behind. You don't want to be the joke. The air got colder as we descended. The steps were slick, narrow, and seemed to go deeper than any normal basement should. When we reached the bottom, it didn't feel like a floor. It felt like a void. There were no lights, just concrete walls and a long hallway that disappeared into black. The space felt heavier, like the air itself was watching. We walked slowly, lights pointed forward. The hallway stretched on, and soon the stairs behind us were swallowed by darkness. That's when we heard it. Knocking. Soft, rhythmic, from somewhere deeper ahead. Knock, knock, knock. Pause, knock, knock, knock. Again. "What the hell was that?" John whispered. "Could be pipes," Ian offered, though his voice cracked. "Could be someone," Mars said. "A squatter?" We crept forward. The hallway twisted and narrowed. At one point it forked, and we took the left. It opened into a room, empty except for a full-length mirror, bolted to the far wall. The mirror didn't reflect us properly. We saw ourselves, but slightly off, like a poor imitation. Mars's reflection blinked too slow. Ian's mouth was moving, but he wasn't talking. My own reflection stared at me, eyes wide, lips curled into a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then it tapped the glass. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped back. "That's messed up," I said. "Let's go." "Seriously?" John reached for the mirror. "What if it's a two-way, like someone's watching from the other side?" Before he could touch it, the lights on our phones flickered. For a split second, the room changed. The floor was slick with something dark. The walls were covered in symbols I didn't recognize. Circles inside eyes, rows of slashes, spirals that seemed to move. And in the mirror, there was something else. Behind us. Tall, pale, faceless. Then the light steadied, and everything was normal again. Did anyone else see? Ian started. I saw it, I said. We all stood there, breathing hard, trying to convince ourselves it was the booze, the fatigue, the shadows playing tricks. Then the mirror cracked. We ran. The hallway twisted again. The floor sloped upward, uneven, like the building had collapsed inward at some point. Mars slipped and scraped his arm. We pulled him up and kept going. At last we saw light, dim and flickering, an exit sign. We burst through a rusted door and spilled into the open air. We were on the street, a block away from where we'd entered. The sky was turning purple with dawn. No one said a word. We limped back to campus in silence. We didn't talk about the hallway or the mirror or what we'd seen standing behind us in that flicker of darkness. But that night, I couldn't sleep, because in the silence I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. I don't think we left that place. Not completely. I think it followed us up, and I think it's waiting for the next person to pull the cones aside. We should have just called a goddamn Uber. I've flipped dozens of houses, ugly ones, old ones, some where the floorboards whispered when no one was walking, and others where the walls bled mildew no matter how hard you scrubbed. But this one, this place on Harlan Avenue, it was different from the start. Me and my wife, Rachel, bought it at a foreclosure auction. Cheap. Too cheap. 3-bedroom Victorian, built in 1908, curb appeal like a postcard. Peeling paint, of course, and the usual rot, but it had good bones. We thought we were lucky. That was before we went into the basement. The listing didn't mention one, and from the outside you wouldn't know it was there. But we found a hatch under an old rug in the pantry, a metal ring embedded in the floor. The kind of thing you tug up and it groans like it's waking up from a bad dream. Rachel didn't want to go down. We can seal it, she said. No one needs a basement anymore. But curiosity's a hell of a drug, and I needed to know what we were working with. The first time I went down, I took a flashlight and a pry bar. The air hit me like a wet glove. Stagnant, cold, earthy. The stairs were concrete, cracked, and covered in dead leaves, not wood. Concrete. Who builds a basement like that in 1908? It wasn't a finished basement. It wasn't even properly dug out. More like a cross between a crawl space and a bunker. Ceilings were just over 6 feet, dirt floor, exposed brick walls, and something else. Scratches. Long vertical gouges in the brick, deep, uneven. Like someone or something had raked it over and over again. They weren't random either. They formed a kind of pattern. A figure, maybe. No, a symbol. It almost looked like an eye. The deeper I went, the worse the smell got, like wet copper and rotting meat. I gagged and turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. A voice, a whisper, just barely above the rasp of breath in my own ears. My name, Evan. I stood there, frozen. "Rachel?" I called out, already knowing it wasn't her. Nothing. When I got back up, Rachel was in the living room, said she hadn't moved, said I looked pale as hell. "I think someone might have died down there," I said, joking, half joking. She didn't laugh. That night, we both heard the footsteps. Not creaks, footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming from beneath the floor. Rachel didn't sleep. I did, but I wish I hadn't. I dreamed of the basement, not the way it was, but deeper, endless. And I was walking through it, barefoot. The dirt was warm, breathing, and there were hands, dozens of them, pushing up through the floor, reaching for my legs, pulling. I woke up screaming. I didn't go back down for 2 days, but on the third, I had to. I had contractors coming to quote plumbing work, and I needed to assess the pipe runs. I went down with my flashlight again, but this time I noticed something new. A patch of the dirt floor near the back wall had collapsed in. A sinkhole, maybe, but cleaner, like it had been dug. The edges were smooth, deliberate. I crouched to look closer. That's when I saw the teeth. A human jawbone, half buried, still had some yellowed molars. I scrambled back, bile rising in my throat. I called the cops. They came, took photos, dug it up. The bones weren't just from one person. There were 5, all children. Ages 8 to 13, murder victims, they said, likely from the 70s. But no suspects, no ID, nothing but shallow graves and time. We should have sold the house right then, taken the loss. But we didn't. We were in too deep. We rationalized it. Maybe the evil was over. Maybe the house was purging it. But that was before Rachel started sleepwalking. I'd wake up and she'd be gone. Find her in the pantry, just standing over the open hatch, staring down. Sometimes she'd whisper to it. Words I couldn't understand. Scratchy syllables that made my skin crawl. The last night, we don't talk about that night anymore. I woke up to the sound of digging, not like an animal, deliberate, slow. Shk, shk, shk. I went to the pantry. The hatch was open. Rachel was gone. I grabbed the flashlight and ran down. She was there, kneeling in the dirt near the back wall, hands bleeding, digging with her fingers. There were tears streaming down her face. "They're still down here," she said. "More. Beneath. Listen." And I did. I swear to you, I swear to God, I heard the whispers too, children's voices, dozens, maybe more, some crying, some laughing, one repeating my name over and over, Evan. Evan, Evan. I pulled Rachel out. She didn't fight me. We sealed the hatch the next day, bolted it, welded it shut, covered it with concrete and tile. We never sold the house. We left it. Moved across the country. But some nights, when it's quiet, I still hear digging. Not from under the floor, from inside the walls. And Rachel, she still sleepwalks, still whispers. She doesn't say my name anymore. Now she says theirs. I don't believe in ghosts, never have, never wanted to. The world's terrifying enough with just the living in it, but something happened a few months ago in my grandparents' house that I still haven't been able to explain. And believe me, I've tried. My grandparents live in a quiet part of upstate New York, where towns look like time forgot them. Big, creaky Victorian homes with sagging porches and wood-burning stoves. That kind of place. Growing up, I spent every summer there, fishing, catching fireflies, falling asleep to the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the hall. I always liked that house. It felt safe, familiar, except the basement. It always gave me the creeps, cold as hell even in July. One bare light bulb dangling from the ceiling, and these old wooden shelves stacked with jars of stuff you couldn't pay me to open. It smelled like dust, mildew, and rusting memories, but I never really feared it. Not really. Not until I stayed there last fall, after my grandfather's stroke. He survived, thank God, but needed help getting around. So I took time off work, packed a bag, and headed up for a few weeks. My grandmother was grateful. Said she'd finally feel comfortable going to sleep knowing someone else was in the house. I stayed in the guest room upstairs, but most of my time during the day was spent in the basement, believe it or not. Grandpa had a massive model train set down there, an old, intricate thing that ran through fake mountains and hand-painted towns. He couldn't maintain it anymore, and I offered to fix it up. Something to keep my hands busy while they rested. The first few days were uneventful. just dusting, rewiring tracks, figuring out which power lines still worked. But on the fourth day, something shifted. I was down there around 6 p.m. The sun had gone down early, and I hadn't turned on the overhead light yet. Just the work lamp over the train set. I was replacing a piece of track near the far wall when I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned, expecting to see Grandma or Grandpa, but no one was there. I waited a second. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. I went up, checked both of them. Grandpa was asleep. Grandma was in the kitchen, headphones in, making soup. I went back down, more confused than scared. Maybe old houses just sound like people sometimes. The next day, it happened again. Same footsteps, same timing. But this time, they didn't stop at the bottom of the stairs. They walked behind me. I heard them soft but clear, like bare feet on cement. I turned and shined the flashlight. Nothing. Now I'm a skeptic. I've always explained things away. Wind, plumbing, animals, old wood. But this wasn't creaking. These were steps. Deliberate. Pacing. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the train set, how it was always cold down there. But lately it felt colder, wetter, like something beneath the concrete was breathing. 2 nights later, I woke up at 2:13 a.m. I remember the time because I looked at my phone when I heard the sound. It was the train, running alone. I bolted out of bed and headed downstairs. No one else was up. I went to the basement door and felt a wave of ice hit me before I even opened it. I switched on the light and went down. The train set was running. All the lights were on, the tiny houses, the miniature church, the gas station. Everything was glowing. The train chugged along the tracks slowly, smoke puffing from the stack, whistle blowing faintly. Here's the thing. It wasn't plugged in. I'd taken the power supply apart earlier that day to replace some frayed wiring. It was sitting on the table, disconnected. But the train was running anyway. I stood there just staring, frozen. And then something new happened. The overhead light exploded. Glass rained down. The train stopped cold. The entire basement went dark. I turned and ran. I didn't go back down for 3 days. When I finally did, everything was quiet. The broken bulb still lay in shards. The train sat still. But something was different. Someone had written on the wall. In the dust just behind the train set were 4 words drawn with a finger. "I'm still down here." I backed away, slowly, barely breathing. And that's when I heard the laughter, childlike. Just a single giggle. Not malicious, but wrong, echoing from somewhere inside the walls. I left the house that day, cut my stay short. My grandparents understood. I didn't tell them what I saw. They don't need that burden. Hell, maybe they already know. I've done research since then. Turns out the original owner of the house in the early 1900s was a widower. Lost his daughter in a drowning accident. They say he lost his mind, dug out the basement himself over the course of a year, said he was building her a place to rest. He died down there. Heart failure, found with dirt under his nails. They never found a coffin or a body. I don't know what I believe anymore, but this experience has made me always think twice before chalking something up as simply my imagination. I don't talk about this often, not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, though they usually don't, but because saying it out loud feels like waking something up. I was 9 years old. My best friend at the time was a kid named Marcus. We'd met in 2nd grade, bonded over our shared obsession with old monster movies and G.I. Joes. Marcus lived in this crooked old house at the end of Holloway Street. the kind of place that looked like it sagged under the weight of its own secrets. His parents were always working late, so we had the run of the place after school. But there was one rule, strict, non-negotiable. Don't go into the basement. His mom had said it like a joke when she first told us, but her eyes didn't smile. Naturally, that made it the most interesting part of the house. Marcus and I would sometimes creep down to the door and dare each other to open it. Once he pushed it open just a crack, and we both got spooked by how cold it was. Not just chilly, unnatural cold, like the temperature dropped 30 degrees between the hallway and that black mouth of a stairwell. But we never went down, not until that day. It was late October. The sky turned dark early, and Marcus's house always felt wrong when the sun went down, like the shadows leaned in closer. That day, we'd finished watching The Gate, one of those 80s horror flicks with stop-motion demons. The credits were rolling, and I dared Marcus, "Let's go down there." Just for a second. He said no at first, but I could see the conflict in his eyes, like the basement was calling him too. Eventually he gave in. I remember the door creaking open like it had lungs. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, rotted wood, and something else, like rust but sharper. Blood metal. Marcus flicked the light switch, but nothing happened. We should have walked away right then. Instead, we grabbed flashlights and went down. The stairs moaned under our weight. Each step sounded like something breathing, something ancient and shallow. When we hit the bottom, our lights swept across unfinished concrete walls, shelves stacked with dusty jars, and an old washing machine that looked like it hadn't run since the 70s. And then the scratching started. At first I thought it was mice, but this was too deliberate, slow, measured. Like fingernails across stone. Marcus froze. "You hear that?" I nodded. We turned toward the far corner, where the scratching was coming from. There was a large wooden wardrobe there, one of those old freestanding types that doesn't belong in a basement. The door of the wardrobe was cracked open just a few inches. "I don't remember that being here," Marcus whispered. Neither did I. The scratching stopped. I raised my flashlight and stepped closer. Against all reason, all instinct, I pulled the door open. Inside was nothing. Just blackness, like the wardrobe wasn't a piece of furniture, but a hole cut into the world. My light didn't even penetrate it. It was like it absorbed it. Then we heard the voice. It came from the wardrobe, but also inside our heads. A dry, peeling whisper. "Help me. My skin. Bring me my skin." Marcus bolted, but I couldn't move. My flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor, casting frantic shadows. Something was coming out of the wardrobe. It moved wrong, like it didn't understand how joints were supposed to work. Limbs bent backwards. It was tall, too tall, and covered in weeping red muscle, wet and twitching like raw meat. No eyes, no lips, just glistening, skinless flesh. It didn't walk, it crawled, backwards, and it was humming, a lullaby. Something snapped in me, and I screamed. That finally broke the paralysis, and I ran. Up the stairs, past Marcus, through the living room, and out the front door. I didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. Marcus never followed me. His house was quiet for 3 days. Then the police came, said he'd gone missing, vanished. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle. His parents were devastated. I told them. I told everyone what happened. No one believed me, not even my own mom. She thought I was traumatized, said I must have made it all up to cope. But I remember the thing's voice, the way it slithered out of that wardrobe like it was born in nightmares. I remember the red, pulsing muscles, the empty sockets that stared without seeing. and I remember the last time I saw Marcus. It was weeks later. I was walking home from school, passing a construction lot. I glanced through a chain-link fence, and there he was, standing across the field. Only it wasn't him. His face was wrong. His skin didn't fit right. It hung loose at the edges, like it had been put on. His eyes were empty, and he smiled at me. That night I heard scratching at my window. It never opened, but I didn't sleep. I still don't. Not well. Now I'm 24. I've moved 3 times since then, changed states. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it again. Help me. My skin. And I wake up in a cold sweat, just trembling. I'm not telling this for sympathy. I'm telling it because I want someone, anyone, to believe me before I die. I'm 28 now. I haven't been in a basement in over a decade, won't even step on cellar doors. My girlfriend used to think I was being cute about it. "What are you scared of, the boogeyman?" she'd tease. But it's not the boogeyman. It's what lives beneath him. Let me take you back to when I was 13. I'd just moved in with my Uncle Gary after my parents died in a car accident. He lived in this old farmhouse in the middle of goddamn nowhere, like something out of a murder documentary. It had one of those stone-walled basements that looked more like a dungeon than a storage space. First night there, Gary handed me a flashlight and said, "Don't go down to the basement after dark. Pipes make weird noises, might scare you." He said it casually, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Thought it was weird, but whatever. My parents were dead, and I was numb to most things back then. A week in, I started noticing things. Stuff would go missing from my backpack. Pencils, candy, even a whole math notebook once. My door would creak open at night, slow and quiet, but no footsteps, no floorboard groan, just a crack of shadow and stillness. Then came the scratching, not loud, just faint, like nails dragging against stone. It came from the floor, from below. I asked Uncle Gary if he had rats or something. He just looked at me and said, "Don't feed it." That was all. Don't feed it. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the floorboards, flashlight in hand, heart pounding in my chest like a drum solo. The scratching came again around 2 a.m., this time faster, more eager. And that's when I heard the whisper. "I'm so hungry." I froze. The voice was soft, like a child's, but wrong. Too low. Too wet. I pressed my ear to the floor because 13-year-old me was an idiot, and I swear to God, I heard something breathing. I snapped. I ran downstairs, grabbed the flashlight, and opened the basement door. The air that came up was thick. I started down the stone steps, each one colder than the last. The flashlight flickered, and for a split second, I saw something move at the bottom. It was fast, crawling. I told myself it was just my imagination. The light came back on. The basement was empty. Just old shelves, rusted tools, a wooden table covered in dust. I turned to go back up, but something clattered behind me. I spun around. A coin, a penny. It rolled from the far wall and stopped at my feet. Another followed, then a third. From the shadows, a voice whispered again, clearer this time. "I'm starving. Please." Then the light died. Not flickered, died. I shook the flashlight, but it was no use. I reached for my phone. Dead. That's when I felt the floor beneath me shift. Something moved under the stone. I backed toward the stairs, but they weren't there anymore. I reached out and my hand hit stone. The basement had changed. The door was gone. I turned in every direction, panicked, breathing hard, whispering to myself like a lunatic. Then I heard a crack, like a knuckle being popped, followed by another, then a third, closer. A sound like bones rearranging themselves. Something was down there with me, and it was getting closer. The voice came again, not from one spot, but from everywhere. Above me, below me, inside the walls. "You smell like your father." That stopped me cold. I never told Uncle Gary what really happened that night. When I finally made it out of the basement, sobbing, hands bloody from scratching at the stone walls, he found me collapsed on the floor, screaming nonsense. He just looked at me like he'd seen it before, like he knew. After that, he nailed the basement shut. He told me, "Don't talk about what you heard. Talking gives it power. That thing's been down there long before me, before this house, maybe before people. I left that house when I turned 18, never looked back, until 3 days ago. Gary died, heart attack, left me the house in his will. I wasn't going to go, I swear to you, I wasn't. But I got drunk, and something in me snapped. Some dumb part of me said, face it, burn it down if you have to. So I drove there. The house was exactly how I remembered. Dusty, still, wrong. But the boards over the basement door were gone. The door was wide open. No note, no signs of entry, no explanation. I should have walked away. Instead, I went down one last time. The steps creaked beneath me. Same smell, same icy breath of death. But the stone walls looked fresher, like they'd been fed. And at the bottom of the stairs, sitting neatly in a circle, were items from my childhood. My lost math notebook, my G.I. Joe figure, a half-eaten candy bar. And then I saw it, not its full form, just a glimpse through the cracks in the wall. White, papery skin stretched too tight over too many joints, eyes that opened too many times, a long horizontal mouth. It smiled. I knew you'd come back. I ran. I don't remember how I got out. Maybe it just simply let me go to hunt me down later.
If you enjoyed the journey and survived it, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who sleeps too easily, and subscribe for more original horror stories delivered straight into your nightmares. And if you have a true tale or twisted idea you'd like me to bring to life, leave it in the comments below. I read them all. Some of my favorite stories come from minds just like yours. And so the final candle is burned out, but some stories never really end. They wait in the corners of your mind, and now so must you. You have heard the incantations of the demised, the shadows sworn to secrecy. But what slipped through, what followed you back into the light, if these stories stirred something inside you, if they made you hesitate before turning off the lights, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because next time, we're going deeper. So rest while you can, because next time the story just might be about you.